So it looks like Armenia is repeating Ukraine's mistake.
All right, Alexander, let's talk about Armenia and the elections in Armenia, Pashinyan's continued efforts to move Armenia towards the European Union and towards NATO. He's taken Armenia west, and we have the Russian statements and the Russian actions, actually, which are basically telling Pashinyan, don't create a Ukraine Maidan 2.0. Don't make the same mistake that Ukraine made.
When there was Ukrainian Maidan revolution in 2014, I was like, oh no, Ukraine's fucked. And I was right. It's a democratically elected president run out of the country by basically Western-funded thugs. And then the U.S. appoints its leaders and basically gets rid of all pro-Russian politicians in the country by forcing them to flee. And then it holds elections. And surprise, surprise, it's only Western-aligned politicians that come into power. I think Ukraine has more banned political parties than any country on earth. Yeah, look at that. Look at this list. Yeah, you just banned, just like what Germany's trying to do in banning the AfD. You just banned any political party that represents views you don't like, and you can turn any democracy into a joke.
Pashinyan, he's not hearing any of it. It's obvious that Pashinyan wants to hang out.
They banned Russian language at various degrees, like in state jobs, schools, and yeah, they can't actually functionally completely ban the Russian language because I think like 3/4 of the people in Ukraine speak Russian, or 2/3, I forget which one, and some of them don't know Ukrainian, so they can't just force it. But they're doing everything they can to try to get rid of Russian. It's funny. Zelensky actually he speaks Ukrainian with an accent. He's actually his first language is Russian. That just a little trivia for you.
Out with Macron and with Merz and all of these people, it's as clear as day. And the Russians are sending out the warnings, and they're also taking steps to make their point by limiting imports of Armenian agricultural products, Armenian food that needs the Russian market. And we could reach a point where we're even talking about Russian energy, which powers about 80% of Armenia. I mean, Russia.
And it's not just. Don't think that it's just. By the way, Armenia is right here, and this is Russia up here, and this is the Russian controlled part of Georgia. This is Georgia, and in Iran, Turkey, and Azerbaijan here. Basically, it's not a friendly neighborhood, this place, by the way. It's very unfriendly. Well, as I was saying, Armenia doesn't just get Russian energy. It gets Russian energy at a very, very sweet discount. Think like $35 a barrel. You have, in the real oil market, oil going for like 140 barrels per oil if you want to load up a tanker. But Armenia here is getting it like at $35 a barrel. That ends if Armenia turns against Russia. Then they have to pay the 140 instead of the 35. How do you think that'll do for the area economy?
Talking about Russian energy, which powers about 80% of Armenia. I mean, Russia has a huge presence in Armenia. So where do you see things going?
I think that we are heading towards a bust. In other words, I think that Pashinyan is so committed now to this policy that even if, in his private moments, he perhaps wonders whether the moment has come to change course. I don't think he can. I don't think he has those moments, by the way. I think he's absolutely convinced, as people like him always are, that ultimately, if the Russians cut Armenia off, then the European Union will step in and will bail Armenia out, and
that won't happen.
Will be well in Armenia. I think he is profoundly wrong. I think that when you look at the totality of Pashinyan's time as Armenia's leader, what you see is an Armenian retreat on all fronts. I mean, they've lost Nagorno-Karabakh, they've lost the war, they're in a very, very vulnerable position in negotiations with Azerbaijan and Turkey. They've lost their major ally, Russia. They've alienated it profoundly. But I think that, as I said, Pashinyan, who has strong backing within Armenia itself from a certain section of Armenian society, and even more so from very powerful elements within the Armenian diaspora.
Where gas is the cheapest. Russia, you see Belarus, and Armenia is part of that, I think. It's still part of the yellow because of Russia. Now, they don't have cheap Russian gas anymore. It'll devastate their economy.
Nonetheless remains committed to this course, and he will follow it. And I also going to say something, he's going to win the elections. I don't think there's any doubt about that at all. I don't know how popular he really is in Armenia, but the opposition looks to me deeply fragmented. And
that's not an accident. You see, that's how you control a democracy. You just you destroy the opposition, you destroy the actual candidates. There's no solid opposition candidate to vote for. What you're going to do? There's no choice. That is how you rig a democracy.
Divided. And, well, just to say it, I think Pashinyan is going to make sure that the elections are won by him. And the risk of...
Why it's pretty cheap in Africa. The oil producers. Anywhere that is an oil producer and not a big economy, like the United States, yes, it's an oil producer, but we consume more on average. So, these are net oil importers, so that's why the cost is more. But they don't produce much, but they don't use much either. They're probably oil exporters. Go for a map. Oil exporters. So if you compare these two, so those African nations that you said were really cheap are oil exporters. Coincidence. Then over here, this one, oh. Well, they probably have oil, even if they just some domestic oil, and they just use it all up. Same thing here. It's cheaper here. And there's no oil exporters by the tip of Africa, and that's where... And this is an industrialized country that uses a lot. Of course, government policies and taxes on gas do influence things too.
Of course, that he is running is that one of the reasons that he's been able to remain Prime Minister of Armenia, and despite all of the setbacks and defeats that Armenia has experienced over this time, is because Armenia itself, the economy has been very strong, but the economy has been very strong basically because of the economic linkages with Russia.
And I want to add one way that we are leveraging control over Armenia is the media, that global media. U.S. just sets it and, being aligned with the West is good, Russia bad, and just that influences the minds and the voters in Armenia, for example, especially the diaspora, those abroad, and those who are traveled to Europe and want to be part of, the European crowd. It's feel they're part of the enlightened Westerners. And of course, the NGOs that go in and then propagandize and get people to convince them that it's in their interest to be aligned with Europe when it's not really in their interest to be aligned with Europe.
And I think he understands that at some level. But as I said, he's so deeply committed to his course that I don't think that's going to stop him now. I don't see how it can.
Yeah, and he's going on and on about how he's going to eventually get to a referendum. But until then, Armenia is going to benefit from the Eurasian Economic Union, and they're going to benefit from the European Union. The best of both worlds is what he's presenting to the people. Eventually, we'll get to a referendum, and we all know what the results of that referendum are.
Well, of course, exactly. Well, of course, absolutely.
It's so similar to Maidan in Ukraine.
Oh, it's
scary how similar it is.
Just a curiosity, how does it justify secretive weapon programs in the United States, the global nature of the internet? And what type of secretive weapons program are you talking about? I just don't follow. Are you talking about AI, or are you talking about physical weapons of war? Because any non-allies will basically just be fed intel easily. Oh yeah. Well, the United States tries to control the English language internet space. Like, if you speak Russian, you can get a completely different view of the world by going to Russian forums and I should do some research that way using Google Translate. It'd be interesting to see what's going on there. But it's a lot harder to do searches in a foreign language.
It's like
English is easier to learn compared to Chinese and Russian. Much simpler alphabet, and it's universal. Yeah. But it's one way countries can be isolated from U.S. influence is if they have a hard-to-learn language like Japan or Russia. It makes it harder to be infiltrated.
Absolutely.
it's so similar to Maidan in Ukraine.
Oh, it's exactly
it's scary how similar it is. It's like
It's
copy
exactly
paste.
the same. It's a copy-paste.
It's a copy-paste. I bet you the NGOs, they copied and pasted the NGOs from Ukraine to Armenia.
And I mean, again, you have the same, group of NGOs who are incredibly active. And it's out of that world, of course, that Pashinyan himself comes. And of course, they control large sections of the media and the commentariat in Armenia. And they are pushing that whole sort of NGO world, which is exactly what you have in Kiev.
And I have to say, on some level, Russia, this is your fault. This is a country, Armenia, on your board. If the West is using dirty, underhanded tactics, do something to fight that. Maybe before Armenia turns into a weapon to be used against you. I mean, look how many Russians are dying in this Ukraine war. If you had just prevented the Maidan coup 14 years ago, Russia could have done that if they weren't idiots. Then they wouldn't have lost hundreds of thousands of Russians in a stupid war, and millions more Ukrainians would be alive. I think they should rush to more in fighting this nonsense of color revolutions right on its borders.
And what you had in Kiev in
Putin does things by the book way too much in some cases.
2013. And before that in 2004, when there was the Orange Revolution. Anyway, they continue to push this line that, we can move forward and we can have the best of all worlds. And when it turns out that we can't have the best of all worlds, well, then we blame the Russians. Which is exactly what we saw in Ukraine. And when the Russians in Ukraine...
Europe provokes Russia into a war that kills, that's probably killed over 1 million Ukrainians, and it's Russia's fault. Never mind that Ukraine basically made it impossible for Russia not to intervene. It was 100% a war triggered by Ukraine, and yet it's Russia's fault.
Ukraine started to insist that
Russia basically was poking the bear with everything it had, and then it's, oh my God, it's the bear's fault for waking up and attacking us.
Ukraine must pay market prices for gas. You remember we had the gas wars, and we're going to get exactly the same thing happen in Armenia today. They also are going to find that their energy costs are going to surge, but again, they are going to blame the Russians for this. And of course, they're going to do something else. They are not on particularly good terms with Iran at the moment, which doesn't trust them. So they're going to have to turn to Azerbaijan for alternative energy. It's the only way out, it seems to be.
What a disaster.
Yeah.
Surrounded on one side, you have Azerbaijan. On the other side, you have Turkey. I mean, you have to be the most incompetent of leaders to position your country. And
it's not incompetent. It's a corrupt leader selling out their country for foreign interest. There's a good chance Armenia will cease to exist as a country because either Azerbaijan or Turkey will just come in and take it over, because these are enemies. And Turkey and Azerbaijan are enemies of Armenia. It's basically protection from Russia that's the only thing that's keeping this country here.
In such a bad way.
Yes. Well, I don't know if incompetent is even the right word. You have to be the most blinkered leader to position your country in that kind of way. And of course, he's going
to get filthy rich, this leader that's betraying Azerbaijan. He's going to retire in style in Europe with hundreds of millions of illegal gains from allowing his country to be exploited and raped by Westerners.
Speaking very abusively about the people from Nagorno-Karabakh, which I thought was completely extraordinary, but he did. He's, again, becoming very hostile to the Armenian church. And again, that is a little bit like what we saw in Ukraine, just to say. But to repeat again, he's going to win the elections. He's got this very vocal class in Yerevan that support him. He's got the support of the
The EU gave $15 million to secure the elections in Armenia.
NGOs. He's going to get powerful funding from the diaspora, from some sections, not everybody.
You couldn't hear me, but I had quotes there about secure the elections. It's it's basically it's $15 million to rig the elections.
Diaspora supports him. So Armenia is now on this trajectory, which is going to end in disaster. Of that, I have no doubt at all.
So what happens if Russia really starts cutting off all the business links?
Well, the Armenian economy goes downhill and goes downhill.
Can you make the argument that?
Yeah.
Just want to ask you, can't you make the argument that Ukraine was a big
It is evil shit.
country, so it's very difficult for the EU or for the West to prop up Ukraine. Armenia is small, so the EU can easily come in and
No, it's isolated. You have Turkey. It's not like Ukraine, which at least had NATO states on its borders. Yes, technically, Turkey is a NATO state, but it's not very aligned with the core EU. And no, it's not an EU member, Turkey. It's a NATO member. Sorry.
and prop it up with 5 billion or 10 billion euros or whatever. I mean, can you make that argument? So Russia leaves, the Russian business leaves, but Macron tells Pashinyan, or the United States tells Pashinyan, don't worry, we'll float you 10 or 20 billion in loans with the IMF, and then we'll impose austerity and all that stuff, but still, we'll get you through this.
Yeah. I'm going to argue that the opposite is the case, precisely because Ukraine was a big country with industries and agriculture and all of those things. It had a kind of internal resilience that was able to keep it going, albeit in an increasingly decayed way, despite the fact that economic relations with Russia broke down. In Armenia, as we previously saw in Georgia, precisely because these are small countries with no real alternatives to the Russian market and Russian industry and all of those kind of things, it's going to be far more difficult to substitute. So the European Union, for example, gave huge amounts of money by Georgian standards to Saakashvili. You remember when he was Prime Minister of Georgia? But in the end, that did not change the downward trajectory of the Georgian economy. We've both been to Georgia over the last year.
Yes, that's what happened to Ukraine, and it's going to happen to Armenia. Already happened to Georgia. It cut itself off from Russia. Right here, this huge economy right above it. And it's just suffered ever since. But it aligned itself with the West.
Yeah. And we could still see, even now that things are beginning gradually to shift, we could still see the enormous amount of economic damage that was done. Armenia is heading in exactly the same direction. So yes, they could give him $1 billion here, $1 billion there. It will end up again in the pockets of a small, very small group of people. But it cannot replace organic economic links, gas, energy, exports of fruit, flowers, those kind of things, brandy, all of those kind of things that Armenia produces, machine tools, engineering tools. It can't. The Russian market really has no substitute for Armenia. And of course, within Armenia itself, within Russia itself, there is an enormous Armenian diaspora, which provides remittances. If that dries up, that's also a massive problem for Armenia too. So the
reason that would dry up is if Armenia is kicked out of Russia's trade union with its neighbors, with Belarus, with its friends, then all these Georgians that are all these Armenians that are in Russia will have to leave. Their permit to live in Russia will be revoked because they're no longer part of the Russian trade union, and then they have to go home and they can no longer make money in Russia and send it home. So you have a huge source of funds into the Armenia's economy that then get, the family, whoever is getting the money, spends it in Armenia. Well, that's gone. And you have, I think a majority of Armenia's trade is, again, with Russia. And they leave the Russian trade union, that's gone. Cheap energy from Russia, that's gone. It's just devastated to Armenia, and there's nothing to replace it. It's even worse than Georgia and Ukraine because it's even further from Europe and the ability to benefit somewhat from agreements with Europe.
The European Union can give an awful lot of money, but the record of Georgia shows that
the money is going to go to a corrupt Western elite in Armenia, and the rest of the country will be fucked. Like the remittances from Armenians in Russia that are being set back, that's being spread across the economy, and because there's families that spend the money that goes into community, it's very spread out. Money from the EU is just going to go into the pockets of the ultra rich, mostly 90% of it, and so the regular Armenian is just going to be fucked by this.
Goes unevenly. It doesn't ultimately help the economy to develop in the long term or in the short term.
Yeah. And what I worry about is that as Armenia...
the money Europe gives in these situations goes to like a few corrupt people. Then what do those few corrupt people do? They take the money and they invest it back in Europe, into European companies, into or United States stock market. And so it's really giving money, and the majority of that money gets put back into European institutions and doesn't help the Armenian economy at all.
weakens. Azerbaijan and Turkey are going to pounce.
Well, this is the difference.
And the U.S. and the EU are going to do nothing about it.
If it's a loan, then it's even worse, because the money goes to corrupt leaders who then deposit it into secret accounts and basically in Europe and the United States, and then there's only the debt left for the Armenian people to pay through higher taxes.
This is the fundamental difference, because Georgia did not have enemies around it. I mean, the only enemy it had was as an enemy it chose to have was Russia. This is under Saakashvili's time. But there was never a moment when Georgia's entire existence might potentially be threatened. In the case of Armenia, it isn't like this. I'm not saying that Erdogan and Aliyev are telling themselves that, this is the moment to march on Armenia and capture Yerevan. That isn't the plan
at
the present time. But any Armenian with a knowledge of history ought to know that these two nations are ultimately...
And you have to understand the geography. This right here is part of Azerbaijan. So you have Armenia here, and you have Azerbaijan here, Don't you think that Azerbaijan would like to connect these two territories together and be one nice continuous state? This area right here, Armenia is not keeping it. Not if it gives up Russian protection.
Opponents, enemies of Armenia, in a way that Georgia never had enemies. And they might indeed pounce. It's not as if Azerbaijan doesn't still have claims against Armenian territory. And the same applies to Turkey too, by the way.
Yeah, and you have that corridor, which we know that Azerbaijan wants to connect.
Yeah,
I mean, you have the Trump, whatever it's called, the Trump route now, whatever he's calling it.
The corridor.
That's not going to be enough for Turkey and Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan's going to want to take it so that they can create a connection to the enclave that they have.
Absolutely. And, when that happens and they do that, and they will say, that Armenia can't protect it, that only Azerbaijan can, and then they'll start to deploy their troops there, and they'll be backed by Turkey when they do it, and then that will create a situation, and gradually, the risk is that...
Yeah. Azerbaijan takes this area, Turkey takes this area, then both Azerbaijan and Turkey decides that, Armenia can't really function as a country anymore. It's too small, and they take the rest. And you don't have Armenia anymore. Just wondering, curious, what is this? Well, global bankers like the Rothschild will have connections everywhere, especially to the oil trade. So I wouldn't doubt it.
That as the months and the years pass, Armenia will be whittled down to basically Yerevan and its and the places around it, and even that gradually will become economically unsustainable. Now there is time before that happens, but that is the risk that Armenia faces, and I think Armenians, including people in the diaspora, need to understand that this is not an easy or friendly neighborhood. Armenia, if they want to have good relations with France and Germany, by all means, let them have good relations with France and Germany. But ultimately, their guarantor, ever since the 18th century, has been Russia.
Well, just to finish the video, the poison that they've put out there, the NGOs and the collective West media, and Pashinyan himself, is that Russia did not come to our aid when we had the recent conflict with Azerbaijan.
Yeah, that's what the NGOs are saying. It's propagandizing Armenians and rewriting the narrative.
The CSTO did not spring into action. So that's the poison that they've put out there in order to justify this move to the West. Russia didn't help us a few years ago, so why should we believe that they're the guarantor? We should look elsewhere, to France or to the United States. And I say the word poison. I say the word poison because it's a lie. It's a perversion. The way Pashinyan and the NGOs
Always a lie. It's convince people to vote against their interests by just rewriting history and lying to them.
the media frame it, an absolute perversion.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, it's worth pointing out that France, the European Union, the United States did nothing to help Armenia at that time either. So, I mean, why they think that they would in the future is another matter again. But they didn't help it then. And as you absolutely rightly say, it completely distorts the reality. The fact was, it was perfectly obvious that the Pashinyan wanted to dump Nagorno-Karabakh as soon as possible. He refused to take any step to support the Armenian defenders in Nagorno-Karabakh.
I don't know. I'm just guessing here, but what that means is there was a frozen conflict here, and he just basically let Azerbaijan take a territory so that it wasn't a frozen conflict anymore. And so he could, because you can't, if there is a frozen conflict, you can't move towards the EU. You can't be sort of in permanent war with someone and still try to join the EU.
And that was the cause of the crisis. When a previous government, which had worked hard to build up relations with Russia, when it was in power, there was no threat to Nagorno-Karabakh at all. Just the same.
Not to mention that Pashinyan recognized Nagorno-Karabakh.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. You're absolutely. I forgot to mention. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I forgot to mention that, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so it was obvious he wanted to, and the reason, just to add context, the reason he wanted to dump it is because he had to get rid of the frozen conflict in order to clear the path towards EU and NATO integration.
Exactly. So he basically, he had a frozen, he betrayed Armenia by giving up the territory. I'm actually going to look into that. Romania. Look at all these different maps that aren't like the current map. All this territory, I think, all this territory is no longer part of Armenia. That just tells you how much land the current leader of Armenia just gave up. This is how much land joining the EU already cost Armenia. Sorry, what a joke. This could be, just compare the two. That's now and what it was in 2020. Armenia's fucked. Anyway, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Can watch on Kick or Twitch, and I'll see you next video. Bye.